Can the St. Louis Cardinals continue this torrid pace that they've been on over the last month, or will they eventually fade away? We'll discuss it today on Locked On Cardinals.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily St. Louis Cardinals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Cardinals fans. I'm JD Hafford, and I'm your host for Locked On Cardinals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. You can follow me on X at JD Sports Radio, as well as the podcast on X at LO_Cardinals. We're on YouTube as well. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Hit that notification button so you know when the new stuff is dropped. Also available on TikTok, Instagram, and Locked On Cardinals. It's a show serving Cardinal Nation and giving the best fans in baseball all of the info about the birds on the bat. So the Cardinals enter their series against the Rangers this weekend with a 32-24 record, which is no small feat considering they were 11-16 in the month of April. Now, when May began, they were 14-17 overall, despite a more spirited brand of baseball, one that most of us were still enjoying. Things just weren't clicking. They weren't clicking on a consistent basis quite yet. So 14-17, underwhelming. But at the same time, it was kind of what people expected, right? When this whole thing started, not a lot of people were expecting much out of the Cardinals. And there were two series that stand out in that month of April that really did some damage. You had the ones in Boston and in New York against the Mets. They lost 13-9, had that blow up from Helsley and lost 5-4. And then the 18-7 game against the Red Sox, where they just got embarrassed on Sunday Night Baseball. Safe to say, fan base morale was down a little bit after that. Then they followed it up with losing 2 out of 3 in Pittsburgh. Then after a nice homestand against the Phillies and the Astros, they went 4-2. They lose 4 straight at Citi Field against the Mets. And then they lose 2 out of 3 in Atlanta. And that puts them at 10-15 on the year. Again, fan base morale a little bit low following that stuff. It was kind of the same old Cardinals. They're just not good enough. They overestimated their prospects. This isn't going to work. But since then, 22-9, and it played like one of the best teams in baseball. And it hasn't been against just like cream puff teams. You know, they aren't just taking advantage of some of the easy parts of their schedule. They took 2 out of 3 against the Brewers, who I still think is a team to watch. Don't overlook them just yet. They just baffled the Boston Red Sox recently. Couple of walk-offs in that one. 2 out of 3 against the Mets. 2 out of 3 against the Phillies. The Royals. They do lose 2 of 3 against the Detroit Tigers, but they play very, very well in 2 of those games. That second one, certainly a very winnable game. Didn't go their way. Sweep the Diamondbacks, who I still think is a very good team in Arizona, although they're sliding a little bit right now. They're in a tough spot, but the Cardinals are a reason for that. The Cardinals sweep them, and they're like, oh, gosh. But folks are still skeptical on whether or not this is real or just a hot month for St. Louis. That's fair to question. You should. Again, nobody expected the Cardinals to be all that good coming into the season. A lot of people thought they were going to be really, really bad. Will Leitch at MLB.com put out a story giving his 3 reasons why you should believe in what you're seeing from the Cardinals so far, whether it's real, and then 3 reasons why it may not be. And I thought we could go through those today just to get an outside perspective from a national writer on what they're seeing from the St. Louis Cardinals. You've heard my thoughts day in and day out of what I think about this team. What are other people saying about them? So let's start with the why they're doing well, why they are real, and why you should trust what you're seeing from the Cardinals. Number 1, their defense. And again, you can read full article at MLB.com, but it's their defense. Will starts with, he says this was the beginning of it, was the choice of making Victor Scott II the everyday center fielder from day one. Says the move has turned out to be a master stroke. Scott instantly has become one of the best center fielders in baseball. Newt Barr has held up fine in the less challenging left field. And stunningly, Jordan Walker, whose outfield defense was troublesome in 2024, has transformed himself into a fantastic right fielder. he moves on to the infield, saying Mason Wynn might be the best defensive shortstop in baseball. Arenado has been resurgent at third base. He's back to being a Gold Glove candidate over there, something he said might be his primary late career goal. Brendan Donovan, team MVP for us, as we know. Talked a lot about him in the last episode, but he's been excellent at second base and left field when he plays out there. And even Wilson Contreras has been much better than expected in his first year at first base. They've even improved at catcher by mostly moving Ivan Herrera to designated hitter and having Pedro Pages and Joel Pozo split time behind the plate. The Cardinals still lead in outs above average. They're a plus 22 right now. They've dipped a little bit recently. A couple of bad games where they've had a few errors here and there. So that's dropped a little bit. But the Astros are in second place at plus 18. So still a pretty decent lead there. Will believes in the defense and says as long as they are healthy, they should remain the top defense in baseball. And as a Cardinal fan, you love to hear that, right? Because since I've been on this earth and have been able to follow the game of baseball, this organization it prides itself in good fundamental baseball. That's what it was always all about. And it always started with the defense. Specifically, being strong up the middle. That is something that they always aspire to be. And catcher, shortstop, second base, center field, after a couple of years where things were kind of in flux a little bit, you have that again with the catching position. It's not Yachty-like, but we need to get over all of that and realize that it will probably never look like that ever again. Yadier Molina was a 1 in a trillion catcher. It's not going to be like that all the time. We can always sit there and go, well, Yachty would have thrown him out. Yachty would have done this. But what good does that do? He's not coming back. All right, at least not as a player. So finding the next Yachty or Molina, that shouldn't be a goal because that's almost impossible to find. It's a rare thing for you to come in and day out and be that good at everything that has to do with the position of catching. So we got to get over that. But you got to admit that Pages and Pozo back there have done a pretty darn good job. The pitching staff loves these guys. And Ivan Herrera, he's still getting sprinkled in there at catcher. But obviously the other two are they're just better defensive catchers. There's nothing wrong with that. Ivan Herrera is just a much better offensive guy than both of them, too. But then you got Mason Wynn at shortstop. You got Donnie at second base. So the middle of your infield, fantastic with Nato over at third base doing what he does. And then Victor Scott in center field. You know, Michael Ciani was great out there, but no offense whatsoever. Victor Scott this year, strong defensively, strong offensively. Right back to that formula that made the Cardinals very, very successful for many years. So all of that is quite good. We're going to get to the offensive side of things here next, which is, two of the reasons why the Cardinals are maintaining, or could maintain, I should say, their good play moving forward. We'll get into that next, coming up on Locked On Cardinals. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Then crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving is going to give you 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats that are going to help you feel fuller longer. When you're dieting, what's the problem, right? Tummy rumbles. You go look for something quick and easy to eat. Usually, you'll make a bad decision. But if you got Wonderful Pistachios in your cabinet, you won't make that mistake. So when you're watching Cardinals baseball or Stanley Cup playoffs, NBA playoffs, we got the final set in both of them now. Whether you're watching the Battle Hawks, you know you're going to want something to snack on during those games. So make a smart decision. Grab Wonderful Pistachios. That way you've got something super snackable and something good for you. Get you the quick protein boost, which is great for those of you trying to build muscle. Also provides all 9 essential amino acids, which is huge. And you do it all while you're watching the big game or a movie or a TV show, whatever you want. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thanks again for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen every day. Leave your comments on YouTube as well as on X anytime you want. That feedback is always welcome and encouraged. A lot of great feedback coming from yesterday's episode about Brendan Donovan and whether or not he is the best second baseman in baseball right now. A lot of good discussion going on in the comment section there. We're going to talk about some of those comments and the fan feedback coming up in an upcoming episode, but a lot to get to in this one still. So we're working on two more of the reasons why you should trust the St. Louis Cardinals and what they've done so far. And it's no secret that the Cardinals were willing to sacrifice wins this year to allow them to figure out what the future holds for Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman, two first-round picks that they want to be the centerpiece of this offense. They're really hoping that they'll become those guys. But when they're not playing every day or they're not even up in the major leagues, it's hard to figure out whether or not that is something that is attainable. And this was the year that they said that they're going to let these guys play and see what they got. And that brings us to Will's second reason that the Cardinals' resurgence is real. He points out that the offense has stayed very good despite both of those guys not hitting all that well early on. Talking about Walker and Gorman, Will says this: they will have a full year to figure it out, but so far neither of them really has. Gorman is hitting 191 with just one home run. Walker's hitting 215 with an alarming strikeout rate. And yet the offense, even with these two struggling, is still thriving. They're seventh in runs scored, seventh in OPS, and second in batting average. He does point out the seasons that Brendan Donovan and Ivan Herrera are having. Those guys have been monsters. Also highlights the improvements from Victor Scott, Mason Wynn, having a healthy Lars Nootbaar. Goes on to say this, though, about Jordan Walker and Gorman. He says, even the better news, Walker and Gorman are slowly starting to come along. Walker had a huge hit to win a game against the Royals, and both of them tripled in succession on Tuesday against the Orioles. If the Cardinals can get those two going, look out. Now, the one thing that I will point to here that he brings up quickly, talking about Nootbaar, he brings up the health factor. And losing Ivan Herrera was awful for an entire month, and you saw the effect that had on them in April. Go look at their record. They didn't win as much. But other than that big injury, we've only had like very brief IL stints by Mason Wynn and Nolan Gorman. Willie had the back spasms recently, but overall they've stayed extremely healthy, which certainly has helped them become a more consistent offensive team. When you got the same guys in and out of the lineup, and instead of just plugging dudes in, guys that are supposed to be backups and having to make them start all the time, you've seen Burley come around, which is cut into Nolan Gorman's at bats, because Burley has been so good against right-handed pitching. They've got a nice mix going here. And if there happens to be an injury, I don't think there's a certain guy on the roster, like if you lose him, that this team will just fall apart now. The Ivan Herrera injury was something they had to figure out, but Joel Pozo came in and kind of settled things down. So you don't want injuries, and it's usually the healthier teams throughout the season are the ones that have the better records eventually. So staying healthy obviously is going to be a key. Last reason for believing in the Redbirds is their under-the-hood numbers are all good. And what he points out is that the Cardinals have a plus 45 run differential. That's essentially the same as the Phillies and better than the Mariners. And the deeper you dig into the numbers, the better their record looks. Clay Davenport's adjusted standings, which takes into account schedules, equivalent runs scored and allowed, and all sorts of factors that don't show up in the traditional standings, are even more optimistic. He continues, adding that according to third-order winning percentage, the Cardinals are the third best team in the National League, behind only the Mets and the Cubs, and thus ahead all of those teams that they'll be battling for the wild card spots. And at the end of this is the bold statement that you're going to love. He says, this is not a fluke. If anything, the Cardinals' record should be even better than it is right now. So that's got to make you feel pretty good about what you've seen so far on the field and make you feel a little more confident that a national writer is seeing all of this from the Cardinals, from his perspective, not from us here on this side of, with the St. Louis Cardinal lens glasses on and wearing the colors and stuff. This is a guy who's looking at it as no what's the word I'm looking for here? He don't care if they win or lose. He's just there to see is this team good or not. He sees that they're good. Now, he does come up with reasons why he thinks that, you can be skeptical about this, which we'll get to. But I went in and checked other teams' run differential. And the Cardinals plus 45 that he mentions in there is better than a couple of teams ahead of them in the overall standings. The Phillies, who are 1 win behind the Tigers for the most wins in baseball. Cardinals have taken 4 of 6 from the Phillies. And then he's got the Padres, who are just percentage points ahead of them, but have 1 less win than the Cardinals do. So they're playing like one of the best teams in baseball. The Cardinals are also 16-12 against teams over 500. This is important because that's better than the Dodgers. The Dodgers are 10-9 against 500 or better. The Phillies are 13-12. And perhaps most importantly, the Cubs, who are 12-13. They have a losing record against teams over 500, but they kick the snot out of the teams that they're supposed to be. 23-8 against teams below 500, while the Cardinals are just 16-12 below 500 teams. So they lost series to the Angels, to the Red Sox, who are spiraling right now, the Braves, the Pirates. So you got to beat the teams. And like the Braves and the Red Sox, I feel like are teams that I'm not going to get all that upset about. You hate getting swept by a team like Boston. But Atlanta was playing really, really well at that moment when the Cardinals played them. So I'm not going to stress about those. But, losing a series to the Pirates, that's you can't let that happen. The Angels were playing very well at the beginning of the year. They've slid off a little bit, although they won. I don't know how many, the 6 something in a row recently. So it's not like they're just a pile of garbage. But like when you go up against other teams later on down the road that you're supposed to be, like, the Orioles have not played well. Took 2 or 3 from them. This weekend against the Rangers, they have not played all that well. You want to get at least 2 out of 3 against the Rangers as well. So a lot of good things to why the Cardinals are where they are right now, which has got to make you feel pretty darn positive. But he does give a couple reasons to be skeptical. So we'll get 3 to be exact. So we'll give you the reasons why they might fade out coming up next on Locked On Cardinals. Thank you again for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. You can find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Again, we're going through Will Leitch's story at MLB.com. It's up there if you guys want to check it out for yourself. Gives 3 reasons to be skeptical. And the number one reason shouldn't come as much of a surprise to any of you. The exact words that Will uses here is, the pitching still feels a little held together by spit and baling wire. I don't know what baling wire is. I know what spit is, and it seems like that means that it's kind of flimsy. And it's hard to argue with this one because we've all been surprised at how good this starting rotation has been. And he points out the same things that I've been telling you here at Locked On Cardinals throughout the year. Not a lot of strikeout stuff outside of Libby and Sonny Gray. Fetty, Michaelis, Palante normally do not strike out a lot of dudes. Palante had 7 the other night. We've seen Fetty have as many, I think, as 8. They have 8 in the one game, maybe more. But it's not a normal occurrence. Normally, it's like 3, 4, something like that. And the other thing is whether or not the Michaelis we've seen through most of May. I know his start against Baltimore wasn't great, bad conditions, and he's just having trouble getting the ball down. It's not like his stuff looked horrible, but is what the other games that we've seen between that Boston game and this last one against Baltimore, is that sustainable for Miles Michaelis? That's a question. As soon as Michaelis started giving up hits in that game, my feed was blowing up with people like, see, he sucks. He's still not good. Blah, blah, blah. Everybody is just waiting to pile on Miles Michaelis. And I get it because he's had a tough couple of seasons. But at the same time, he's pitched so well recently where in that game, I was like, yeah, he's just up in the zone. If he could get that stuff down, he wouldn't be getting hit around as much as he was. was it 9 hits in 4 innings. So that was very old school Michaelis, although they didn't hit a lot of home runs against him. Usually when he's like that, it's 3 or 4 bombs are getting knocked off of him. And it didn't quite get so out of hand like it did in Boston, where the Cardinals were out of the game. Cardinals ended up coming back and winning that game, which was great because the bullpen was so good. His second reason, lack of power. Now, you know my feelings here if you're an everydayer. I don't think you have to have a bunch of sluggers to win, but Will points out that the Cardinals' home run leader is Lars Nootbaar, who is their leadoff man with 8. There's no question that the Cardinals are a contact team rather than a power hitting team. That's not hurting them too much just yet because of how well they hit with runners in scoring position. They're third in the majors at 272, but that's the sort of number that can fluctuate. Another thing I want to add to this is that the Cardinals also lead the major leagues in batting average on balls in play at 312, which if you go back the last couple of seasons, 312 is right about who or where the league leader is at the end of the year. Is that something that will dip eventually? I don't know. But I'd rather them put the ball in play and find out rather than swing for the fences and strike out a bunch. That is where I start getting very, very frustrated. You're putting the ball in play and you're putting the pressure on the defense and making them make plays. Great. But when you're just swinging and missing or you're just watching balls go by, that's not going to do us any good. So I'm glad their approach this year at the plate has not been so much like, dude, we got to hit for more power. No, you don't really. Let the power just kind of happen. Just let it happen. I will take the doubles all day long. Last reason that Will brings up says that they are highly unlikely to make any helpful moves as the trade deadline approaches. And this is something that people have begun to ask John Mozeliak about, that what might he be thinking when we get closer to the deadline, which is at the end of July. So we're still 2 months away, but people are already starting to think about where and who is going to be available when that time rolls around, which they should, and would Mo, if the Cardinals are still in contention like they are right now, would he make a move? What could he add? Will brings up that the markets for Arenado, Fetty, and Helsley, guys that many thought could be available, that they may not be now because of the way things are going for the Cardinals. Arenado doesn't appear like he's going to go anywhere. The offensive numbers are just not there. Nobody's going to want to pick up that contract. The Cardinals aren't going to want to go pay him to play somewhere else. And it looks like he's having fun this year. I've enjoyed the way Nolan Arenado has played, specifically defensively. I know offensively it can be frustrating from time to time, but he has come up with quite a few big hits so far this year. But instead of him being the main cog of the offense, he's become a piece of the offense, and that's okay. He's transitioned into a pretty good number 6 hitter. He's not going to be great. He's not going to be Nolan Arenado from 3 years ago anymore. That time has passed. It just is. But to accept him for what he is now and the defense he's giving you over there at third base and just as a guy in the clubhouse, why trade Arenado? You don't need to anymore. Eric Fetty. Here's my thing with Eric Fetty moving forward. Eric Fetty, don't you feel like Michael McGreevy could slide in and do what Eric Fetty does? So if somebody comes at you with a crazy offer for Fetty or even Helsley he gets the saves, but man, nerve-wracking from time to time. If somebody comes at you with a big offer, don't you feel like they might pull the trigger on a trade for Fetty or Helsley and get something really, really good back? I don't feel like if you took those two away from this team that all of a sudden they're not in contention anymore. Do you? So I wouldn't expect any splash moves, but more like the moves we've seen recently. If they do keep everybody intact, veteran guys whose contracts are up and could fill a need, healthy lineup, there's not a lot of spots for any new hitters to be in here. If the rotation falters, Michael McGreevy and Quinn Matthews hopefully will be ready to rock. He's looked really good in his rehab start so far. So those are some guys you could bring up. There's other arms that you could possibly think about as well. Tekoa Roby, been looking really good. But those choices might be just as good as any old guy on an expiring contract. Why do something just to do it? Stay with the formula you've been using. Continue to use the guys in your organization. Bullpen help. Obviously, that's something for sure. Always a need for teams. But Will's final words are, the Cardinals are surprising and fun and sometimes joyous to watch. Can it last? I, for one, will keep watching every night to find out. As will I, as will the rest of Cardinal Nation. And in the words of the great Eddie Johnson from Christmas Vacation, I don't know about the cat, but I sure am enjoying it. And that's how I feel about Cardinal baseball right now. The ride will continue in Texas tonight against an underachieving Rangers team, much like the Orioles. Very, very underachieving. Much more was expected from them, and it just has not clicked. They just won the World Series a couple years ago, and offensively, it's like we don't know what's wrong with them. I think Brett Boone's their new hitting guy now, and it's bizarre because the Rangers, when you look at the lineup, you're like, wow, they're like sluggers all over the place, but it has not clicked so far this year. Tonight, it's Matthew Liberatore against Jack Leiter. He's the former number 2 overall pick in the 2021 draft, 3-2, 4.17 ERA. The numbers have been solid in his last 3 outings, but those starts were 2 of those starts were also against the Rockies and the White Sox, who are the 2 worst teams record-wise in the league. Walks have been a real issue for Leiter. So my advice to the Cardinals, be patient. Don't go chasing. Like TLC says, don't go chasing waterfalls. Just don't. Make him come to you, pick a spot, and attack. But don't help him. The offense has had issues all year for the Rangers. They did get Corey Seager back. He's been on the IL 3 times already. Marcus Semien has been a shell of his former self. He's hitting under 200 this year. Former Cardinal Adolis Garcia is hitting just 208. Still's got power, 7 home runs, but 57 strikeouts. So he hasn't been all that good this year. The team is hitting a combined 220, which is only better than the Rockies. That's crazy. And they don't walk much. They're their lowest walk total in baseball. So they're up there hacking. They're swinging. You just got to keep the ball in the ballpark against them, and you have a very good chance of winning. So that's the key for me in this series. Saturday, Sonny Gray against Patrick Corbin. Yes, that Patrick Corbin, who was rotting away with the Nationals for so long, has been surprisingly good with Texas so far. Then on Sunday, you got Eric Fetty against Jacob deGrom, and you know how nasty he can be. Although this last start for deGrom, first time in all of his starts that he's ever made in Major League Baseball, that he didn't record a strikeout. Very, very strange. He is coming back from missing last year with the injury, but has looked pretty darn good so far this year. So you want to jump on these guys in games 1 and 2. You don't want to split those and then rely on beating deGrom in game 3 to win the series. So, he's a 2-time Cy Young Award winner for a reason. The dude can be really, 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 really nasty sometimes. So I'd rather take my chances with Patrick Corbin and Jack Leiter. How about you? Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen every day. If you haven't already, give us a follow on X at @LO_Cardinals and at JD Sports Radio, TikTok, Instagram, and Locked On Cardinals. Subscribe on YouTube, and help our channel and our love for the Cardinals grow. You guys are the best fans in baseball for a reason, and we will see you next time on Locked On Cardinals.